So, as promised, I would be making a series of, um, narratives about my way to coming to opera. So, I finished off with my being in my apprenticeship at British Leyland. This ended in 1983 in the May, and during the summer, I decided I'd go on a Arvon Foundation course, which is a writing course. I'd be going as a beginner, so I was unemployed, and I had secured a position at Glasgow University to uh, do a course in mechanical engineering, and so I was doing something during the summer, and I the course I went on was attended by, all told, 16 other prospective writers. And we had two resident writers, Diane Shaldon and Rose Tremain, and a guest writer. And we didn't know who it was until they turned up on the day. And it was Malcolm Bradbury. And so he and Rose Tremain are good buddies, or were. Malcolm's passed on since then. At the University of East Anglia, the writing course that they have there. So we have some very prestigious authors in our midst. And we were fortunate enough to be in a thatched roof cottage in Totley Barton, a hamlet near, I always remember this, the village of Sheepwash. Only in Britain could you have names such as that. And I recall the first morning of my course, waking up to the sound of typing coming from most of the other 15 residents on the same course. It's quite unusual, really very unusual. I've never had it since, because it's all on quiet laptops now, no doubt. So I luxuriated in this sensation, hearing this rhythmic clatter on the keyboards in the other rooms. And I lay there pondering, what was I going to do on this course? And it fired me up hearing those other writers at it. I thought, blimey, shall I continue with other work that I've written, or am I that good enough I can write something afresh? And I chose the latter. I'm going to prove once and for all if I am indeed a writer. So I leapt out of bed and found myself a typewriter, and we had a target of getting something prepared for that very evening. 8 of us would be reading something from our work. And so that was my target. I just had a few hours, and so therefore it'd be a short story. And I was just focused entirely on the writing. And then we had our evening supper, and then we'll gather around in the lounge to give our stories. It's really something phenomenal to be in a writer's circle, and each one of you is telling your tale. It's magical. And so it came to me, and I realised I didn't have a title for this story. I've been writing it I've been so focused on the writing. And so I asked the people there gathered to name it at the end of the story. So I narrated it, and at the end they chose the name Feathers. I won't go into that as the story at this time. It's I've not actually published it anywhere, so I'll look to putting it online sometime in the future. Anyway, it was well received, and I was very satisfied because I'd proven to myself, I'd satisfied an audience. It was well received, and but I proved to myself I could write, but I still hadn't decided in what genre was I was best suited to my writing. Um, this wasn't to come about the answer until many years later. But for now, I continued with my songwriting, and But whilst I was on that course, I had a time. I sat with Rose Tremain, and on a one-to-one, and I asked whether she knew exactly where she was going when she wrote, and she looked at me and said, "Yes, of course," quite surprised. And I answered, I prefer not to know where I'm going. That a rough idea is sufficient for me, as it leaves the story to go off in ways unexpected and ways which could be completely better than my thinking it out beforehand. Just letting my players, my characters, take the story where it's best to let it go. Um, at the time, I didn't have any proof of this being a successful ploy, but now I really do believe that is the way to go. It's going with the flow rather than going with thought, because you can overthink a thing such that it restricts the characters from what they would really have done, and it shows when you read or hear the narrative. Anyway, as I said, I was back to my songwriting. So that autumn, now we reach September, I was off to start university at Glasgow, University of Glasgow, and so I arrived for Freshers Week, and on my first night, I went off to the university, Glasgow University Union, with a posse of younger undergrads. It was quite silly of me to expect otherwise, but we sat in the bar and we drank. And I soon became aware of the number of unfinished glasses of beer lining up in front of me like soldiers. And my comrades were in a very merry mood, as you can imagine. And they seemed intent on consuming beer at a cask an hour. I could not compete. I'd just finished a relationship with a girl in Birmingham, and drinking no more than 2 pints was the norm with her, if any at all. So surreptitiously, I started to empty my beer beneath the table, and so every time the ribaldry gave vent to shouts and guffaws, I would be emptying a glass. And anyway, I can't say the beer in Scotland is worthy of downing in any other way. Honestly, perhaps it's improved since. Towards the end of the evening of this gaiety, one of my colleagues noticed the floor was wet. He was splashing in it, I remember. And he mentioned it, but nobody, I think at this stage, they were a bit drunk, so nobody seemed to notice. So I escaped. However, when I did get back to the halls of residence at St. Margaret's Halls, I was terribly sick, and the room was spinning. I swore on the great white phone to God that I would never again go with that crowd. However, I think I was a bit too precise in the oath, because the next evening I this time went out with new acquaintances to the Young Conservatives Club, and it was cheese and wine we were quaffing, and a very different affair in that sense, but the result was the same as the night previous. I returned to halls and the room was spinning, and again on the great white phone, Billy Connolly's great white phone to God. Yeah, that was it, I thought. Never again with these alcoholic students. I'm just not capable of holding my drink. So my first 2 evenings with complete strangers, and spinning bedrooms and all the night vomiting. These are such negatives. Third night, as in any good fairy tale, I decided I'm going to do something completely different. So I looked in the paper and I saw that at the Citizens Theatre in Glasgow, South Side, there was a final dress rehearsal of Die Russen Cavalier. And I thought, great, No students, no bar, just me on my own deciding I would have control of this. And off I went to the Citizens. And it was free as well, fabulous. So there I was, sitting in the stalls, just myself and two women. They could have been the cleaners for all I know. Uh, and Die Ross and Cavalier was performed. It was fabulous performance. The title role was played by Gary Oldman, and Sean Bean was the animal trainer. I remember, although in the program he was called Sean Behan for some reason. Um, it was a brilliant performance, and I was so impressed that I buttonholed the artistic director out in the foyer, Giles Hangull, and I enthused about the performance he'd put on. It's just brilliant. I only regret I didn't think to ask him, is there any way I could help out at the theatre in any way? I mean, that would have been phenomenal. Hindsight came decades later. C'est la vie, eh? So my first alibi comic opera came in a roundabout way, and through my ignorance of my being a librettist, that unfortunately was to last until I was into my 40s. Um, I still continue to write though. So I met up with Marcus, a Swedish architect. I can't remember his surname. He was training to be an architect. He could play saxophone really impressively well. And there was an event, a student gig coming up, and I promised to write a piece for them, for him in particular, and a jazz and blues number. And so this is in 1984 now, and I remember standing in a queue to catch the coach from Birmingham Digbeth station, coach station, to Glasgow, and I was composing Blue River in my head. You can hear this a track on the my SoundCloud page under Red Bard Composer. I think I might have. I'll put it into the text, the link. And yeah, during the coach trip up to Glasgow, I worked the piece and performed it to, or Alec, Marcus performed it to an audience. It's the only piece of mine that's ever been performed, and it went down well. And it is a good blues number, I'd say so myself. I was basing it very much, I was influenced by Alison Moyer's Cry Me a River, which came out a couple of years before that. I did sing it at Robert Burns' dinner, and unbeknownst to me, one of the guests worked for EMI, and he afterwards said that is a very good number. But anyway, I didn't take it from there, and that was pretty much my highlight of music songwriting at Glasgow. Anyway, that's the end of part one, and I'll bring you part two in the not too distant future. Thank you.